I work in the Agile sphere. There are many different labels and titles that kind of describe what I do. Um, I try and help enable agility. Is probably the highest level one I can describe without it becoming too pigeonholed into other preconceptions. And when I say agility, that is it's not just working with, particularly like, for example, like a team of software engineers, so maybe a designer or something who are trying to produce a particular feature or solve a particular problem. Agility in this sense of agile, it's really the entire business or enterprise, the whole organization of everyone, and the ability to be agile. So literally to be able to respond quickly to change, get feedback, and yeah, to be able to move quickly.
And so what kind of things do you do? And how do you use clean when you're doing
Ooh.
it?
So a lot of the time, some of the time I'll be working with one of those multi-skilled teams, as I've just spoke about. So you'll typically have some kind of sort of squad shape. It could be between sort of 4 up to potentially 10 or 12 if it's a particularly large squad. There'll be a mix in there of like engineering, maybe some quality assurance, some design, some kind of product owner or product manager type role. And the team will have it'll have a mission and it'll have a purpose. And then at a lower level, it'll have like a shorter term goal, usually like a quarter type thing, so like 3 months worth. So they will have a goal or particular goals of things they need to achieve. Maybe it's to change some behaviors, maybe it's to increase some numbers, maybe it's to increase revenue, maybe it's to increase acquisition of new customers. Whatever it is, the squad has this goal, and then they then make their plans, they do their discovery, they do their research, they do the testing, and then it's software. So then usually you will have something out at the other end. It could be some changes to like a B2B type product, or it could be changes to like a website or maybe a mobile app or something. So it could be a new feature, it could be changing things around. Or maybe it could be just internal processes. So
And
there
you were
may be
saying
nothing.
that, Mhm. And you were saying that in the planning stage of one of these projects, you would use clean. Say a bit more about that.
Yeah, so planning. So there's a number of different. Again, you can use clean almost anywhere. Well, anywhere as far as I've found. There are a number of different scenarios when I might use it. So there's kind of like the if you want to think of it like as like a micro level, like the team level. So it could be that we've got a very good idea about what it is, and now and the team is trying to technically figure out how to implement it. And if there can be things that there might be some kind of problem statement or something, or a story, if you're using user stories, and sometimes that they can it's fairly straightforward, but sometimes it isn't. And then the team can be, or people can be a little bit stuck and they need a bit of help to try and think about it. And then the kind of clean language, the kind of questions I'd use for then is like, okay, so what needs to happen for this outcome? Okay, and that sort of gets people just starting to think, okay, is there anything else that needs to happen for this? And you can go through and you can explore, and then really the team does the work. um, as and then once you've got this big list or a cloud, however you think about it, of all these actions and all these things that need to happen, then you can start becoming a bit more specific. Say, okay, so with all of that, what needs to happen first? And now you've kind of done the ideation, you've done a bit of thinking about it, and now you're starting to get things maybe into a bit of a sequence. Okay, right, what needs to happen first? Okay, and then what needs to happen? Right, okay, so can can you do that thing? Can that thing happen? What needs to happen for that thing to happen? Because there might be some dependencies. Maybe there needs to be some communications with another team or another unit somewhere else, maybe. So it could end up being a cross-functional piece. You go, well, actually, if we really want to do this, we can't just do it by ourselves. We won't be as effective. We need to be talking to or get buy-in from these other functions.
Mm. So that all sounds extremely straightforward. What's clean about all of that?
What's clean about it? Oh, what's clean about it is I'm not trying to put any of my thoughts about it, because being an ex-developer, an ex-engineer, I will always immediately start thinking, oh, well, jumping straight to solutions. Oh, we could just do that. We could just do this. Oh, surely we just do this. But actually, I know very little about the infrastructure, about how stuff, and actually the squad of the team who are the experts, they're the people who are going to do it. So the clean part of that is me not trying to guide or lead down a particular place, especially to start with. You want to open up. So rather than narrowing down and sort of trying to funnel towards something, you want to expand. So like divergence to start with. So
Mhm.
you want to get a big cloud of ideas. This is how I think of it. It's my metaphor. Um, and then once you've got all of those, then and you've explored some of them, again, using clean, because something that someone might say, how I interpret that may not be how they meant it. And then once you've got that and you've explored it, then you can start to converge again, then, which is then narrowing it back down to, okay, so we think right now, we think this is the way to do it, or this is the right idea. Brilliant. Let's focus and start making a bit of a plan about what our next steps are about this.
So that divergence phase, my hallucination is that that's an important place to be adding clean questions, because otherwise the person in the room who has the most domain knowledge would like you just jump to solution.
That's yes, it seems, yeah. It's a natural it's a natural I guess behavior for engineers to jump straight to
Mm,
solutions, or just humans in general. You
hmm
hear something, oh, brilliant, I know how we could do that. But so the clean language is useful, as in before that divergence. If people are a little bit stuck, it's almost
hmm
like lighting the blue touch paper. So you get a little bit of you are helping those ideas start to come. And then then I'd be using clean to then help explore, clarify, and then obviously some ideas then inspire other people's ideas, and
hmm
where you end up is is usually not where you thought you would. And 9 times out of 10, the thing that you've co-created, or the idea or the plan at the end, is that it's no one person's thing.
hmm
It's literally everyone's, everyone has collaborated and co-created something.
And when it's like lighting the blue touch paper, people watching this will expect me to ask you a question about that metaphor. But instead, I'm going to ask you, does metaphor play a role in how you use clean with your teams?
It does, but not, I don't overly use it. Or I don't overly draw attention to it, but it certainly does.
Hmm
Um, it's usually when people are talk. It's usually I find when people are talking about problems and things, then you can then if if you get a metaphor, you can I will sometimes then ask about it again
hmm
as a means to start unraveling and start that divergence, and start helping the person think about it, clarify some things, and actually start moving towards next steps, a possible solution.
Mm. And one of the examples you gave when we were sort of listing out what we were going to talk about was the kind of business problem where somebody senior wanders in and says, fix it. Say a bit about how clean would help in those situations.
So yeah, so often people will come to say a team or a squad and they come with a solution. So they've done a lot of thinking behind that, or they've had a good idea, and it probably is a good idea. And there's, there's something there, but what they bring is a solution rather than the the problem. So often, you have to sort of like reverse engineer. You have to like work backwards from that and go, oh, okay, brilliant. So if we had something like this that did this, this, and this, what's important to you about that? Oh, right, okay. And then the person would say, well, X, Y, and Z. And you might say, oh, okay, okay. What kind of X, for example? Okay, okay. So what kind of new customer would those new customers be? Or what kind of revenue increase would that be? Or what kind of reporting would that be? Is there anything else about that? Okay, and why is that important to you? And then you can kind of help work, like say, work backwards and start to form more of the problem or the opportunity, and then take that to the squad, if you like,
Mhm.
or the squad can then have that understanding that wasn't necessarily present at the beginning because someone may have turned up with something much further down the line with
And
just
the
yeah.
implication being that the person coming to you initially with the solution, perhaps an ex-engineer themselves, um, has got only one solution in mind. But by taking the whole problem to the squad, you've got a richer array of minds to put their
ex
thinking on it.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Typically, the people bringing, if you like, the solutions are people with incredible like business knowledge and insight. So the chances are there's something really valuable in there.
Mm.
It probably is a really good idea. But like you say, that's one person. That's like one brain. Yes, it's one brain with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. But we can maybe 10 times the impact of this if we then bring it to the squad, not just as a here's a thing, go and do it,
Mhm.
but here's here's the problem. This is what's important. This is what we're going for. How might that happen?
So unpick that just with a ridiculously simple explanation. Let's imagine the boss comes down and says, "Can you change that button from blue to green?"
Mm,
This he know The boss knows that that for some reason he wants to change it from blue to green,
mm,
but he's not making it explicit. By making it explicit, the background to his thinking, he learns, the team learns, and there may be a richer, more interesting solution than just changing it from blue to green
exactly.
that achieves
That's
the
a good way of
results.
explaining it. Exactly. So you might have worked your way back and found out that actually green buttons have a higher click rate, and that's what people tend to go towards. But then you might, let's say, take that to the squad. Someone may have some other knowledge. There may be some accessibility thing. There may be, oh, well, actually, green doesn't fit in with our branding. So how can we do it? What what else can we do that achieves the same purpose or even a better or has even more impact?
Mm.
Um, yeah.
This strikes me as interesting in particular because I was looking at a thing on LinkedIn yesterday. Somebody was posting about, here are 10 stupid things that you shouldn't ask your team to do. Um, and at one level, they looked perfectly reasonably stupid things that you shouldn't ask the team to do. Complete time wasters that some boss man thinks that should be done. But actually, behind that stupid request may well be a huge amount of business knowledge.
Mm,
It's just that the person hasn't shared the business knowledge behind the request.
hmm
So
Exactly. Yes.
it
Yeah.
comes across as stupid.
In that case, yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like not showing your workings
Mm.
and just coming up with the final thing.
And the clean language is helping you to reveal the workings.
It
behind the
help
request.
exactly because actually it may not even be, oh, we want a green button. That's not really the outcome. The outcome is we want more people to be clicking this button. Okay,
Mhm.
why is that? Oh, because we will get more money, or we can show that this feature is more valuable. Okay, so that's the problem. Or the bigger problem is actually we want more people to click this button, not we want a green button.
Mm. And one of the things I'm noticing as you're talking about all this is that you have a structured way of thinking about the questions. So, outcome, for example, looking for outcomes,
Mhm.
a structured way of find out what the outcome is first, then work back. Has that come from your knowledge of clean?
Yes. So a lot of that has come from the 5 Minute Coach. I quite like there are a number of processes and questions in there, and at a couple of places I've been at now, I often create, as soon as I get somewhere, I'll create a bunch of resources, if for no one
Mhm.
else other than myself, in like a wiki. So I now have this table of questions. There's probably about eight of them or so from that book, The 5 Minute Coach, which I've called action planning questions, how I title it. But I that's one of the things I always carry with me, or I always have
Mhm.
a shortcut to it because I found them so helpful. So that particular structure has been certainly cribbed or inspired very strongly by that book.
And you've created them into resources in a wiki.
Mhm.
The implication being this is not just for you to use, but for other people to use.
Absolutely, because another part of my role is not just, I always think of my role as being, it's like you're working to make yourself redundant. Because if you've done when you've done the best job possible, then you shouldn't be needed anymore because you've
Mhm.
been able to impart that knowledge. You've been able to, people have developed, people have learned, people can then do it themselves. They shouldn't, they then don't need you there to help them with those things anymore because they have that knowledge and they have those abilities. So yes, part of that is I create those resources for myself, but also for pointing other people to. So I'll often use them. I'll I'll use those questions for a while, and then say if there's like a lead role or something, or that you're trying to help develop, I will, if you like, then reveal the structure. So sometimes people pick things up just from having heard it and being and getting used to you asking these things, and it's kind of naturally that knowledge just goes across. And sometimes it's more explicit. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
here's a link, here's a link, here's a link. This is a really useful set of questions. Or it might be talking to a group of leaders. So it might be, okay, here are some questions which are good for this type of purpose. Here are questions which are good for this type of purpose, so like open and closed type questions and things. So this is good again for the divergence. This is good for exploration. And then once you start coming back down to your convergence, and then when you actually want to try and maybe get some kind of commitment. So, okay, so can you do this? Brilliant. When can we have this? So they're less explanatory. They're not clean, but they're then closed questions at the end.
And how do people take to these questions? I'm imagining that we're talking about software developers or ex-software developers. How do
Mhm.
they take to these clean questions?
There's a range of people. Probably like 80% developers, typically, depending on the group. They take very well. So I'll normally use a short form, which is which just sounds more natural. So, all right, okay, what kind of thing is that? Sometimes, depending on maybe how long I've been working with a team or a person, or maybe when there's something that requires a slightly deeper reflection, then I'll use like, I think it's like the medium form version. Say, okay, so and that, and what kind of that is that? Or maybe it's the long form. Oh, Um, because that does sound a bit more unusual to people, but it can be deployed intentionally when you want people, if I'm trying to prompt someone to maybe not give the first answer and just have a bit more introspection and just maybe a bit more of a deeper or a different thought about something, then I'll, yeah, use that because they are more unusual.
So there you are slowing your language down. You're repeating their words more than once to them.
Hmm. Yes.
So,
So
and
they're
blue
hearing the,
touch paper, and when blue touch paper, what kind of blue touch paper is that? Blue touch paper,
hmm, exactly.
which is, how many repeats is that? About five.
Yeah, yeah. It is a lot, but it's, yeah, it's that repetition obviously helps because people are then really going back to it again and again and again, and it does. It causes, you can't ask a question to someone without, even if they don't verbally answer. It's that thing, right? You can pose a question and not even wait for an answer. That person will still ask that question internally. So
Mm.
by deliberately doing it, mentioning it 4 or 5 times, it's really bringing the focus and their attention right back to whatever that thing is, the blue touch paper.
And when we're bringing focus right back, that can be high value when we're talking about what you've described as overloaded words in our
Mm,
notes. And agile. And when agile, what kind of agile is that agile?
mm,
For example,
yes.
so how are you using clean in that context?
So yeah, so this is very much, what's the word? It's clarification. It's also like vocabulary, or there's another word for it that escapes me. But it's when people will talk and like say they'll use a word, and there are particular words in software development that are more overused than others. So, two examples, for example, refinement. Refinement is a process of literally refining something. You take something, it could be a ticket, it could be a problem, it could be a statement, it could be a solution, and you refine it. You go over it, you maybe add some more detail, you maybe clear some things up. But people have different ideas about what that can mean and the type and for example, the level of detail that you might go down to. So a refinement could be a very high level refinement of, here are some problems. Let's do a bit of refinement. And you might come out with, say, another 4 problems that are all slightly smaller or smaller aspects of that, but none of those you could go and start work on immediately. You'd then need maybe another round or more than one round of refinements where you're then building a better understanding. Maybe the team has gone away and done a little bit of investigation. Maybe someone's gone and spoken to some customers or something. We've got some answers or some different ideas. And then finally, in software anyway, if the ticket is more than a fairly straightforward task, it then helps to break it down into like the technical steps. But that's really right at the end of the chain. But all those activities are refinement, but they're different types. So you can imagine when people are talking about refinement, if you don't know what type of refinement they mean, what type of refinement is their refinement, you can end up talking at cross purposes.
Hmm. I
Um,
think I heard five different types of refinement in what you said,
I
but
yeah.
but I wasn't taking notes. So if somebody is at cross purposes, so you were thinking let's break it down into 4 or 5 tasks, and the other person is thinking let's work out the technical steps to achieve it. Those
Mhm.
are completely different
Ab-
activities, yet they're both labeled refinement.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. They can be.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So how would you use clean to find out what people mean by refinement?
So in that example, it was during a conversation about our about a particular squad's like delivery flow, if you like. So we're sort of mapping out a way of working, right? How do we work as a squad? Um, let's make how we work explicit. So nothing heavyweight, just some post-its on the whiteboard type thing and some arrows and some lines. Because once you can make it explicit, then in A, it's easy to understand. Everyone can look at it, everyone can align on it, people can challenge it, and you can go, oh, do you do you think we work like that? Because actually, I don't, or I've never seen this thing. When does that happen? So it was during this process of mapping out the way of a typical delivery flow way of working, and the word refinement kept coming up, and I was like, okay, so we've got these different points, these different stages. So I said, I think so. What type of refinement? So we had the word refinement in like at least three post-its. So it's like, okay, but these are all at distinct different stages. So the question was, what kind of refinement is that refinement? And pointing to it on the diagram. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, at this type of refinement is creating small technical tasks. Okay. What type of refinement is that refinement? Pointing at a different one earlier in the flow. Ah, well, that would be when maybe the whole squad is talking about something and we're coming up with ideas or we're asking questions. Okay, what type of refinement is that refinement? Pointing another one earlier. Okay, that's one where there's a smaller group of people. The problem is much, or the problem is much less well defined at this stage. There's taking it to the whole squad at this point may not be a great use of everyone's time. And so maybe there's like just three or four people, typically like seniors or specialists, whoever would be best suited, with the right skills to talk about and have an insight into that thing at that time.
Hmm. So what I'm hearing is what kind of, what kind of, what kind
Mm.
of throughout the flow. But that makes me think of how if you're going off to investigate and find out more about anything, you could be using clean language questions when people go off with their user story in their hand to find out more from the user. The clean
Mm.
language questions could be useful there as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so a lot of the going away, again, it depends who it is that is doing the going away and asking.
Mm,
If it's a squad member, absolutely. If the squad is, for example, taking it to some kind of like end user type
mm,
questions, so that could be a survey, it could be an interview, maybe it's like a UX type test with different variations. Um, I'm less involved in that. And there are various research and methods and things, and I'm not probably more on the qualitative side of that type of research or that type of user testing than clean. Then clean would be absolutely useful, yes.
I mean, I know that clean is also used in UX and all sorts of things, but that's not where you are. So let's focus on where you are and how you're using it. Um, Going back to the sort of the starting of a project or establishing a team, there are a couple of call them clean-based rituals that you've said you use.
Mm.
Um, could you say a little bit more about those?
Yes, so one of the ones that is quite good when you have a group of people, either maybe an entirely new team that aren't that familiar with each other, or they may know each other, but they've never worked together closely before. Or alternatively, you may have like a very well established team that has undergone a bit of a change. So depending on which whichever team model is your favorite, you've maybe gone back to like a forming or a storming sort of stage,
Mhm.
a forming. And one of the useful ways or rituals is one that I think I picked up from you, which is the when you are working at your best, you are like what? So I'd set something up, usually on some sort of electronic whiteboard. If you are all in the room, fantastic. But if not, there are many tools you can use. And ask you would I would ask each person to consider that when you are working at your best, you are like what, or that is like what, and give people a couple of minutes. Frame it as, hey, here's something that's a bit of fun. Let's let's do this. So you aren't saying, right, we're all going to sit down and do a clean language-based exercise now. It's, hey, let's this is a bit of fun. So when you are working at your best, that is like what? And give people a bit of time. I usually model as well. So I will go first and say, I'll have one of my usual current answers,
Go on
having
then.
done this
What's
many
your usual
times.
current
Uh,
answer?
so it tends to be something around a ball of energy or with atoms and things spinning around, whizzing through space. That's the base one. Um, that's like, so then go through people. Some people uh go go straight to metaphor. They're like, and you'll hear things like, oh, I'm like a calm stream running through a summer meadow, or I'm like a river in full force, or I'm like something else. Some people will it's more challenging to maybe get into that kind of or maybe they're less comfortable or they're feeling less safe to sort of flip and give a metaphor, and they may give you something that is feels just very hard or very practical, very direct, or even I don't know. And the trick is the trick, the technique is you just accept whatever is given. So I won't go, oh, what do you mean you don't know? You must know. That's because stay clean throughout. And then typically I'll then just have two developing questions, both of them the lazy Jedi ones. So what kind of X is that X? And is there anything else about X? And we would go around and take each person's initial metaphor, and another team member would ask about something in their metaphor using one of those two lazy Jedi questions. And they'd give their answer. We'd stick that on a post-it. Then a different team member would ask the other lazy Jedi question, or another lazy Jedi question about something that's been said. Then that gets posted, and then it's okay. And then the final one is, given what you know now, what are you like when you're working at your best? To see if those questions, to see how those questions have changed or
And
developed their metaphor.
the benefit of that activity being?
It's a bit of a like I want to say an icebreaker. It's like a familiarization thing. So people get to learn a bit about each other. It can what's the word? Especially if you work in a remote environment, there's a lot of connections that are much slower to get than if you're co-located with people. It doesn't mean you can't get them. You just have to be more intentional about it, and it can take longer to develop those things. And it's a nice little slice of sort of real humanness, something that we can all relate to because everyone's doing it. Everyone obviously thinks in metaphors. So it's a nice way of, I don't want to say removing boundaries. It's a good bonding type exercise. And it can also help other people maybe understand that other team members' reactions to things, or maybe their preferences about, for example, communicating whilst they're in the middle of something. Because if they can understand their metaphor for when they're working at their best, is that they are on their own, hyper focused, nothing else exists, completely looking down. All right, okay. So when I slack you and I don't get an answer back, or you seem maybe a little bit upset that I've interrupted you. Ah, okay. So maybe that was because you were trying to work at your best at that point. You're just really
Mm.
concentrating on something. So now okay, now I can either understand that, or maybe we can change some rules or something, or some guidance about, okay, if I see that you've got your notifications snoozed, I understand that you're maybe in this state, and I also understand that it, it won't be it won't be like that all day. So unless it's dead urgent, I know I can wait, and it's better for me, and it'll be better for you if I do that.
So this activity, which by the way was originated by Caitlin Walker and Nancy Doyle, I believe, but I learned it from Wendy
Oh,
Sullivan, and
was
you
it?
learned it from me. So, uh, but this activity uh, exploits the fact that metaphor is not only the native language of the unconscious mind, but it's also a really good way of communicating about yourself. So if you say, when I'm working at my best, I'm like a stream going through a beautiful meadow, then we can jump to some conclusions about that, which can be which might be wrong, but they've got a reasonable chance of being hits.
Mm,
Um,
yes.
so we use the questions to clarify, to overcome the fact we are making assumptions, and at the same time that our assumptions are more likely to be accurate about a metaphor than a single
Yes.
word such as refinement.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So, for example, you might think you you could be you might talk about something in terms of a boulder or a bend in the river if you were maybe bringing something to that person. Say, oh, okay, maybe we have a bit of a waterfall here actually, and
Or somebody's chucking rocks in.
or someone's chucking rocks in. Yeah, yeah, you may have a better chance of talking more in their language, if you like, of being more identifiable if you already know a bit about their metaphor.
So one of the things I'm noticing here is this is not um, what might be called squeaky clean. We are allowing ourselves to talk about their metaphors and to say, well, this is what I think your metaphor means,
Mhm.
as well as asking some clean questions about it. It's becoming a subject of discussion. It's just ordinary English language stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm rarely completely clean for any great length of time. It tends to dip in and out as needed.
Mm.
Um, Kind of like micro clean sessions. Because you're just talking like normally, and then suddenly something pops up or something happens, and you're like, "Ooh," and you might just dip in. I might just dip into a couple of clean questions. Oh, brilliant. Now I've got that understanding, or now we've revealed that actually there is some confusion here, or there is some misalignment. And then brilliant. Then we can go, we might stay a bit clean or cleanish, or we may go back to, if you like, quote, normal conversation. The
Thank
other,
you. Is there one
okay.
more thing? One more example?
Um, Not necessarily an example, but I would just say that also clean is my fallback. So I use it almost, it's my default. So if someone asks me something or comes to me with something or surprises me and I don't have an answer or I can't process it quick enough, it's incredibly useful. I can just fall back and just ask a question. And if enough, and if for no other reason, it just gives me some more processing time. But usually it's still helpful because you're going to get some more information. And then suddenly
Mm.
you go, oh, right, okay, this is where you're coming from. This is what you're talking about. Okay. But it's
And
so
what
handy just
what
having
kind of
those.
question would you ask then? When somebody comes and surprises you, what kind of question?
It would usually be a what kind of and what kind of thing is that thing? Or is there anything else about that thing? Or maybe it's and what's important to you about this or about that? But
Hmm.
yeah, the two lady, as you coined them, the Lady Jedi ones, they're very quick, very short, very easy to remember, so they can be deployed uh, at
And
the
do
drop of
people
a hat.
laugh when they hear you doing that? The people who hear you doing it a lot, do they laugh? Do they notice?
Generally not unless I've had other conversations explicitly with a teaching component, and even then, people don't tend to. Not so much at the moment. No, 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 they haven't.
And
I
that
don't
that's
think.
been my experience similarly, that people are so interested in hearing their own words coming back to them, they don't notice the fact you're asking the same question.
Mm, yes, yes, exactly. They're yeah, yeah, and again, if you use like the short form type stuff, it doesn't there's nothing unusual about the question will make them that will trigger as that was an unusual question. It just sounds like a normal, quotes a normal English question. Oh, okay. What kind of emergency is that emergency? What kind of great feedback is that feedback?
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. This has been really
Thank you.
awesome. It's so interesting for so many people. And yeah, thanks for making time.
Fabulous. Not at all. My pleasure. Thank you.